I will say a much better component of using using Restream over StreamYard is that it does the countdown for you now. It makes things much easier. What's up, guys? We're back. Episode 3 of Season 2 of Lost. Orientation is what this episode is called, and it is an orientation for a couple different people, both the characters in the show and for us. We get some answers, and in classic Lost fashion, we get way more questions after the fact than answers. But we do get some resolution to the things that we've been introduced to in these first 2 episodes. Would you agree or disagree, Luke?
I would mostly agree, because in this episode, Lost did something that after what I've come to know as Lost, something that I never expected out of this show, and we'll get to that in just a bit.
Yes, indeed, we will. The new component has officially been added. They have officially taken their position as the new enterers of the numbers and such. All of that and more in today's episode of Talkin' Lost. All right, Luke, Season 2, Episode 3, Orientation. Now, like I said, we checked back in with them entering into the hatch. We checked in with the raft survivors, and now we're following both of them on the island. There's not too much that happens with the survivors of the raft picking up immediately after last episode. Michael, Jin, and Sawyer get kidnapped by the people who they assume to be the others, although they quickly realize that they are not the others. Sawyer gets whacked in the face with a stick by a very, very tall guy, played by Adewale Akinye Agbaye, the guy with the longest and most impronounceable name in all of Hollywood. But been in many, many different things. But like I said, this is where we officially meet him as Mr. Echo. They get dragged, thrown in a hole. They're trying to figure out how to get out. Next thing you know, Michelle Rodriguez gets tossed in the hole with them. It's our first major introduction to Ana Lucia on the island after we were first introduced to her in the season 1 finale. We know for this, even though it's not explicitly told to us, they basically put 2 and 2 together. We as the audience put 2 and 2 together that, like, okay, these are not the others. These are clearly other survivors from the plane. As for people who remember, when the plane crashed, the rear section of the plane broke off and landed on another part of the island. And so even though it ends with her, taking the gun from Sawyer and being pulled out of the cage, she was thrown in there in order to try and kind of feel them out. A classic interrogation technique, if you will.
That was definitely done in the 100, like at least 2 or 3 times. But
yes,
I'm not going to hold on to that. That's just a common trope of interrogation and whatnot.
Exactly. It's a very well-known interrogation technique that may or may not have something to do with Ana Lucia's backstory, which we'll get into. Like I said, we still don't have any names. They still haven't explicitly told us. But like I said, for people who have been paying attention to the show up until this point, that can put 2 and 2 together, be like, okay, these are clearly not the others. These are people who have been on another section of the island for these last 48 days that have had no contact with our current batch of survivors, and as a result, may have had to have gone a little bit more feral. So, that's kind of where we leave off. What's called? But like I said, that one's more so just kind of like a brief continuation. We don't check in as much. We spend way more time with the hatch, but I did just want to get that one storyline over with. Now we're in the hatch, and things are going down. So we finally pick up after the last 2 episodes. Like I said, the last episode kind of just a filler in of some of the events. Now this is like the main continuation where, basically, Desmond and Jack are at a standstill. Kate comes in to try and help, hits Desmond with the gun. Desmond accidentally fires. The bullet hits the computer that they have to enter the code into. So now the race is on to try and fix the computer, as Locke and Jack continue their debate as far as what's real and what isn't. Why do we care about entering the numbers into the computer? Yada, yada, yada. So just first and foremost, as this episode being not only kind of another action-paced episode, but also another continuation of the central struggle of this season that was set up in that premiere, the man of science versus the man of faith. Man, the Jack and Locke beef really is getting to next levels here over seemingly whether they should push a button or not.
Yeah, there is this like great sense of paranoia from Jack, I feel, and it culminates in his final confrontation with Desmond, where he breaks down. His science brain wants to believe that no, this is completely fake, but then Desmond says things that make him think, oh, maybe this isn't fake. Like his feelings hurt when he walks by the concrete wall with the electromagnetic waves and whatnot, or like there's a sense of, okay, nothing's gonna happen when it hits 0, but like what if something does? So
Exactly.
that inner struggle of like, oh, okay, I guess I will push the button, as he does at the end of the episode, and Locke being on the other side of it, like he completely believes it. So it's this back and forth for Jack.
Yes, it's a classic Schrodinger's cat situation where it's like, oh, do we push the button or not? Like, what is the reasoning for why we're pushing the button? Does anybody actually know what's going to happen if we don't push the button? It's kind of bringing in all of these different factors, again, debate, all of this different philosophical debate and all that. Obviously, again, the central conflict of the episode is fix the computer. Because the timer, of course, is going to keep going down. So Locke sends Kate to bring Sayid and Hurley down into the bunker. This is a very funny shot where Hurley sees the food pantry and the camera just pans back. And I'm like, yes, classic mid-2000s trope. But essentially what you have, that's exactly what you have here, where it's the Schrodinger's cat situation. That we also finally get some much-needed backstory for with the island, with the origins of, with the organization that kind of set up this station as Jack and Locke watch in the orientation video that Desmond tells them about.
Yeah, that was what I was talking about. Like as vague and cryptic as Lost has been, I never expected them to bring a full-on exposition. Watch this film reel with the characters. Like, okay, this is the most exposition we've ever had.
But even with that, I'm glad this
then it's like
even then it's still cryptic. They still managed to keep it very cryptic that way. With that's our first introduction of Francois Chow's character. Francois Chow is a very well-known character actor. He's been in 1.5 million different things. I think I actually just recently saw him as one of the crime lords on the Penguin. But this was really the first instance where I feel like a lot of us were introduced to him as what was his name that he said? Dr. Marvin something. It's not his real name. They don't use real names, as you learn. But this is really our first major glimpse of the Dharma Initiative, which is this kind of super secret science group that set up all of these different research stations in order to try and research the strange electromagnetic energy that's pulsating from the island. And this is one of the stations that's been set up, referred to as the Swan. Newsflash, this will not be the last one of these stations that we see, but we spend a bulk of this season here. And like they said, there's a couple of clips missing from the station, from the film, so they still don't kind of explicitly tell you what the purpose of the station is or what it's studying, whether it is a psychological experiment in order to study the people who are pushing the button, or whether it is actually the numbers have to be entered in that sequence every 108 minutes in order to prevent some catastrophe from happening. Whatever the case is, it is one of the things where both things could be true. And that kind of, again, is the summation of loss. The fact of, is everything that we're watching real, or do we have to have a little bit of faith that not everything we have is real? And the answer is that it's both. It just depends on which is true at a time. And there are some instances where both is true. And that's kind of, the philosophical, that's why the Schrodinger's cat is a philosophical principle in addition to a scientific principle, because it's the instance where, in the unknowing of which of the two possibilities it is, whether the cat is alive or dead, both can be true at the same time. And that's kind of like I feel like the principle that they're getting at with both the Hatch, the Swan, now as we know it, and with the central theme of the show in general, whether they are just survivors on an island, or whether this is purgatory, or whether this is something kind of in between. The answer is never clear, but if they explicitly tell us the answers, then it just becomes no fun, And in a way, it's kind of the same thing where with Michael, Jin, and Sawyer, as they're being held in the hole, where they think they're being held by the others, but they're actually being held by other people who are on the plane with them. But because those people have gone through different circumstances, they don't necessarily trust them. And now you may discover that they're using interrogation techniques that the others may have used. That's all that I'm going to say. But so Jack and Locke watch the orientation film. Of course, they, Locke is immediately like, Jack, why don't you believe? Why are you so anti-believing? Like the irony being is that Jack is the one that's so anti wanting to do anything or having to do anything with this computer, and immediately doubts it and is like, yeah, nothing is going to happen if we don't push the button. But the irony being that the backstory of this episode is about Locke, and how Locke was a little bit too persistent and couldn't let go of something at one point, because this episode is trying to say how Locke is the one who is kind of unable to let go, how his faith has led him in the wrong direction, because his backstory that we get in this episode is kind of a continuation of what we saw in Deus Ex Machina last season, where his father took his kidney. He's trying to move on, but he just can't. He's going to anger management groups. He just can't take anybody else seriously because he's like, wow, your mom took $30 from you. My dad took my damn kidney after he'd already abandoned me, Then he meets Katie Seagal's character, Helen. Katie Seagal, for any fans of Sons of Anarchy. Gemma from Sons of Anarchy. He meets her at the meeting. They end up hooking up, but he just cannot commit to her. He just cannot stop going and waiting outside his dad's house to the point where his dad even confronts him, gets in the car. It's like, I understand that this may have been hard for you. This was, what was he said? He's
like, you're not the first one to be conned or something along those lines.
Yes, he's like, this was amusing at first, but now it's getting annoying. And I just want it to be locking that it just being like, motherfucker, you took my damn kidney. What am I supposed to do in this instance? Just like let it go? It's like, no, it's not that easy. So the backstory there, and eventually it's Helen confronts him and is like, you have to choose me or him, And that's kind of hinting at Locke's overall struggle in the sense of where Locke's biggest problem is that he's incapable of, kind of letting go of those who have wronged him, which has kind of led him down this path of faith. But the irony being that now that seemingly his faith is being rewarded with, as they uncover more and more layers of the island, and as he kind of has anointed himself as one of the protectors of the island, now it's almost like he actually has to fill the Helen role for Jack, where Jack is so hell-bent on not believing anything with the island to the point where when Desmond confronts him, and you even see Desmond finally recognizes him, and he gets to this whole thing of, it's like, the last time I met you, you were worried that you had screwed up with a woman. What ended up happening? Like, did you fix her? And eventually he pushes him to the point where Jack admits, it's like, I married her. And Desmond is like, oh, and you guys aren't married anymore, which I believe this is the last time we see Desmond for a while. But once we get back together with Desmond and we learn more about his backstory, we discover that that's a struggle that Desmond can relate to, is all that we're going to say. We also get some much needed backstory on Desmond as well, where Desmond admits, like, I've been here for 3 years. All I know is I was recruited to come. All I know is I was on a race around the world. My boat crashed here. Then this guy, Kenzie something, Kelvin came out of the jungle, brought me here, said we needed to enter the numbers. We traded back and forth for 3 years. Then Kelvin died, and now I'm stuck here. And Jack's like, you've been here for 3 years. We've been here for 48 days. Nobody's gotten sick at all. So whoever it was that put that quarantine hatch on there, they're lying to you. So, like I said, getting to the whole idea of, like, a couple things are true, where, again, it's tough for me to say knowing what's going to happen without spoiling anything. But essentially, again, it is a thing of where I believe that what the Swan was set up as, like I said, it was set up to serve two purposes. One, because the hitting of the button every 108 minutes does prevent some sort of catastrophe related to the electromagnetic energy that the Dharma Initiative was studying. And it's a psychological experiment in order to study whoever it is that is pushing the button, because like I said, there's still some other questions as well, like how Dharma was able to transport back and forth between the real world and the island. A couple of other things that still need to be filled in. But for the most part, like I said, we're starting to understand, like I said, that there have been other groups that have studied this island throughout history. Because as they said, the Dharma Initiative goes all the way back to 1970. But like I said, there's a long history of this place that predates even that. So what did you think, like, kind of getting into more of, like, the lore and the history of not only the island, but the other groups of people that have discovered the island throughout the past? First Russo's group, which I believe was somewhere in the 90s. And then, what's it called? And because Russo had only been there for 16 years, Desmond's been there for 3 years. And the Dharma Initiative has been set up since 1970, and we assume that they've been there around then. So, like I said, a lot more history and backstory that we're getting into there. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic Lost. You get 3 answers and you have five more questions. Because we talked about the season 1 did the heavy lifting, introduce characters, set things in motion, kind of introduce us to the island, and now season 2 we can actually go inward to the island and get more mysterious and sci-fi, which was probably my most anticipated part of the show. Like, just seeing what the hell is up with this island, and the characters are just like an added benefit of that. So yeah, now I'm really starting to like, okay, I really want to watch the next episode immediately after, but I won't, because I love doing the show.
Yes,
and just the waiting of it is great.
Yes,
the
waiting.
It's like I'm watching it.
The anticipation.
It's like I'm watching it as it releases. So
yes,
just that little thing. So
It's pretty
Dharma
cool. But
Initiative, I told my mom, because she's seen the show, like I think she watched it like 10 years ago or something. And then I told her, hey, the Dharma Initiative. She's like, yep, I know that, I recognize that. So it is a significant thing in this show. So and back, just to mention the countdown real quick, I feel like that's kind of a Chekhov's countdown. Like it will hit zero, and nothing good ever happens at zero.
exactly.
So I'm just curious to see that. Whether it's this season, whether it's in future seasons, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yes, you will see. Like I said, remember what I said last episode. Every season finale ends in an explosion of some kind. So just something to keep an eye out for. Oh man, that's the power of these types of shows, man. Is you end up bonding with your other family members who may have seen the show before you, but you guys came to it on your own, so you're able to each have like your own individual relationship with it, and then bond as a result of it. Man, just good stuff. This is the stuff that I love about the things that we do. But yes, you would be correct in the sense of where it is a little bit of a Chekhov's countdown. Something will happen, but we're going to have to wait to find out and see what that's going to be.
Like lost makes you wait, but
makes you wait, but
the journey is worthwhile, and
the journey is worth the while.
It's enjoyable.
Yes, like I said, there's a reason why the season finales are always some of the most important episodes. Like we've been saying, season 1 is the character intro episode. It's like the superhero individual backstories. Season 2, that's when we start to get into like more of the lore and the history of the island that will be continued to be explored throughout the rest of the show as the survivors. Like I said, we had hints of the fact that this was no regular deserted island in the first season, and now that those thoughts, those theories, if you will, have been rewarded as we continue to explore that this is not only no ordinary island, but this is an island that people have been exploring and been aware of for a long time. Like I said, we're discovering that the numbers that cursed Hurley for so long serve a purpose here. We're discovering that Locke's faith is being rewarded, but not in the way that he thought. And we discovered that Jack's kind of tumultuous back and forth as a result of kind of his seeming failings in the real world. Because like I said, we learned one more thing where even though, again, he was able to perform this miracle somehow and save this woman who he ended up marrying, unfortunately, that relationship didn't work out. So we kind of could discover how that's like yet another piece of the journey. Like I said, even though the show is kind of transitioning into becoming more plot focused, we are still getting these tidbits of these character backstories in order to help inform on them and their decisions going forward. It's just kind of more in service of a more action and plot based story than it was before. And then also we have this added addition of the tail end survivors that are going to come in, and it's all kind of going to be encircling the hatch. So overall, really, really good episode. Really enjoyable, really fun, really action-packed. At the end, there's kind of what I call a famous Damon Lindelofism, where kind of all of the anxiety of these past built-up issues kind of take center stage in whatever the central conflict of the episode is, and it allows the characters to kind of reach this catharsis. And afterwards, they're not fully healed, but they've managed to kind of resolve something that's kind of been torturing them for a while, where even though Jack is still not on board with Locke completely, Locke is able to get him to ultimately push the execute button at the end. As far as, for lack of a better word, it's taking the leap of faith, if you will. So, well, is the conflict between them over? Absolutely not, because of course Jack is still going to be questioning everything up until the day he dies. But for now, at the very least, this one conflict of discovering what the hatch is has been assuaded, and now that Desmond's gone, the survivors realize they're like, okay, this is the next stage of our mission.
He said the line that you said, see you in another life.
See you in another life. Exactly.
Earlier in the
show. Desmond's classic line right there is what that is. But yeah, good episode overall. Like I said, probably I still don't know if I like it more than Man of Science, Man of Faith, but still, like I said, season 2 is heating up, is all that I will say. And we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep discovering what the hatch is, and we're going to keep getting more pieces of people's backstories. And now that the tail end survivors have officially been set up, we're going to, again, we understand that they will eventually reconnect with the main group of survivors. And then once they discover the hatch, and where things will go from there. So, like I said, a little bit of a shorter recap this week, but we're coming back very soon, as in right after this stream, for our reviews, respectively, of the premiere of Daredevil Born Again. This is a very, very important one, both for the MCU and for media going forward. And a movie that we saw this past weekend, Mickey 17, which again is one that I know that you've been looking forward to for a while. I myself, I thought one thing going into this movie, and I got something completely different coming out of it, which those usually result in my favorite movie. So stay tuned for our reviews of those. Those will be coming up shortly. In the meantime, Luke, for those who are just watching Talkin' Lost, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luke Reviews on YouTube. Been a bit of a busier time, so I haven't gotten a video. But after finishing Cobra Kai, I have this like inkling to make like a best legacy project type video. So maybe I'll do that at some point.
Yes, sir. And if guys, of course, you guys know where to follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube. Follow us on the podcast, and we will see you guys in a few minutes for our reviews of Daredevil and Mickey 17. See you guys soon.